The guns had fallen silent over northern Italy. Smoke hung low on the fields near a small village called Marengo. The earth was scarred by cannon wheels and the smell of iron. Soldiers searched the ground for their wounded, for their boots, for their breath. And among them, someone searched for food. Inside a commandeered farmhouse, the hearth still burned. A single iron pan waited on the fire. Olive oil hissed as it met the heat, sharp, foreign, alive. A chicken was cleaned and cut, not out of choice, but out of hunger. There was no butter, no cream, only garlic, herbs, and a bottle of thin white wine taken from a nearby cellar. A cook worked quickly, sleeves rolled, eyes on the door. Outside, the camp lay quiet, except for the clatter of pots and distant groans. The air smelled of sweat, oil, and victory, barely earned. When the chicken browned, the cook added mushrooms he had found in a field, stirred them through the pan, and set the dish before his commander. They said Napoleon Bonaparte devoured it in minutes, that it was so good he ordered it to be made again the next day and the next, that this was how Poulet à la Marengo was born, from hunger, haste, and a little luck. It's a story the French repeated for a century, and like many fine tales, it began with the truth, then cooked itself into myth. The real Battle of Marengo took place on June 14, 1800. It was meant to be Napoleon's victory march into northern Italy, swift and decisive. Instead, it became a day of confusion and nearly a defeat. At dawn, Austrian forces surprised the French near the plains of Alessandria. Cannon fire tore through vineyards, the smell of powder mixed with crushed grapes. By noon, the French line had nearly broken. Officers fled on horseback, orders vanished in the smoke. Only by sunset did the tide turn, when Napoleon's reinforcements arrived and forced the Austrians into retreat. That victory saved his campaign and, in time, his legend. But that night, what truly mattered to the men was food. Rations were gone. Bread was stale. Salt pork had spoiled under the Italian sun. And the man who claimed Europe still had to eat. So when later generations told the story of a cook named Dunant, or sometimes Dunant, improvising a meal for his exhausted general, it made sense. It gave the chaos of war a human ending. A hungry man, a clever cook, a dish born from resourcefulness. That image, the battlefield turned into a kitchen, was too good to question. For a while, no one did, until history looked closer and found that even the simplest recipe can be missing its main ingredient, the truth. According to the legend, Napoleon's cook searched the countryside for butter and found none. He reached instead for oil, Italian, abundant and cheap. He fried the chicken with garlic and wine, garnished it with mushrooms, and served it still sizzling. Napoleon loved it so much that he declared it his lucky dish. But there's a problem. The man said to have cooked it wasn't even there. He didn't serve in Napoleon's kitchen until months later, and the meal that night was not prepared in a farmhouse at all, but at the table of a cavalry general who hosted the victorious consul for dinner. The story had been cooked up later by Parisian restaurateurs. They sold poulet à la Marengo as a dish of glory, the food of conquest. Anything tied to Napoleon's name sold well. Menus filled with Marengo chicken, Marengo veal, Marengo eggs. France had found its hero, and with him, a brand. Still, there was some truth behind the invention. Napoleon did favor simple dishes, and he did prefer his meals quick, plain, and warm. Perhaps that's why the story survived, because even when it wasn't true, it felt right. Sometimes the myth tells you more about a man than the record ever could. Napoleon's real meals were far from royal banquets. He ate quickly, standing when he could. A servant noted that breakfast lasted 8 minutes, dinner 12. He swallowed fast, spoke little, and left the table before others had finished their soup. The tablecloth often bore the stains of his impatience. He liked chicken most of all, boiled, fried, or fricasseed, sometimes with onions, sometimes with oil. His valet wrote that the simplest dishes suited him best. He loved hot soup, a piece of beef, and a bit of parmesan or roquefort at the end. A few grapes or a slice of pear were enough for dessert. He drank only wine, watered down and plain, never spirits. On rare occasions he allowed himself a sweet drink, tea with cream, or hot chocolate late at night when work kept him awake. He avoided medicine but trusted chicken broth as cure and comfort. There was no elegance in his eating, no performance, just habit. For all his titles, he dined like a soldier still on campaign, fast, functional, and rarely satisfied. History remembered his wars in detail, but his hunger it nearly forgot. Those who served him knew that a meal with Napoleon could turn from calm to chaos in an instant. One afternoon, as the story goes, he sat down to lunch. After a single bite, his mind wandered to a military report that angered him. He struck the table, sending dishes flying. Porcelain shattered. Sauce dripped from the wall. His cook, Dunham, didn't flinch. He quietly ordered the staff to clean the mess and remake the entire meal exactly as before. Minutes later, the same chicken appeared before the emperor, whole, steaming, untouched by the storm. Napoleon smiled faintly. The hurricane had passed. Another tale told of Vienna, where his bodyguard, Rustin, once ate part of the emperor's supper while he slept. When Napoleon woke and saw only half a chicken, he scolded the man for leaving him the bones. He ranted about it for days, as if the theft were treason. Even in victory, hunger ruled him. Food was never pleasure, it was order. And when order broke, even a chicken could start a war. Napoleon's appetite was small but strict. He despised beans for the threads that reminded him of hair. He hated dishes that took too long to serve. Yet he demanded that food be ready at all hours, cutlets and roast chicken waiting day and night. His valet remembered him as both powerful and fragile. His Majesty endured the hardships of battle with ease, but not the pain of indigestion. He often ate too quickly, then lay on the carpet moaning with his head in Josephine's lap. Tea soothed him, so did her voice. He brushed his teeth with a paste of opium, believing it strengthened his gums. He found most medicines repugnant, and preferred to fight illness with broth and willpower. He could command armies, but not his own body. In a world ruled by discipline, his stomach was rebellion, and in that he was human. On the island of St. Helena, far from France, Napoleon finally had time to eat slowly. The sea roared against the cliffs. The air smelled of salt and damp stone. There was no court, no army, no campaign, only meals, books, and memory. His table grew richer, even as his world grew smaller. He tasted sweet wines, claret and champagne, diluted with water. He found comfort in a golden dessert wine from South Africa, Constantia. It was said to be the last thing he ever drank. He still asked for chicken, plain and soft, Even in exile, the dish of his youth followed him. The cooks who served him there said he liked to dip bread into the sauce, as always. The conqueror of Europe reduced again to a man at supper. For a ruler who had measured the world in miles and battles, his last empire was a plate. The Battle of Marengo gave France a victory and the world a story. Over time, the story turned to legend. Menus called it Napoleon's chicken, as if glory could be served in sauce. Cooks added truffles, eggs, even crayfish, until the simplicity was lost. The real dish, the honest one, was never about ingredients. It was about hunger. Napoleon's life began and ended with it. Hunger for power, for motion, for food that filled but never satisfied. And in that hunger, people saw themselves. When Paris dined in candlelight, they remembered the man who ate with his fingers. When history glorified his victories, it forgot that his stomach once ruled the battlefield, that even emperors need to eat. What began as a meal after a battle became a fable of appetite and invention. A story of how myths feed nations as surely as bread feeds men. They said Poulet à la Marengo was born from triumph, but perhaps it was born from something simpler. A reminder that even the strongest hunger for something they cannot keep.